Okay, so get this. Today's deep dive is all about a job I bet you've never even heard of.
Oh, yeah. Let's hear it.
Nitroglycerin Neutralizer,
Whoa. Because that's a new one.
right? Sounds kind of like a superhero or something.
Yeah.
But it's a real job. And it's way more about serious science than, blowing stuff up.
Yeah, when I first heard about it, I definitely pictured like action movies and crazy explosions, but it's actually crucial for safety in tons of industries that deal with chemicals on a large scale. Like think about mining operations where they use controlled explosions all the time, or even huge construction projects that need demolition. It's not just about the explosives themselves, but making sure they're used safely.
So it's more like they're kind of like the guardians of keeping things from going boom when they shouldn't.
Exactly. And nitroglycerin neutralizer is like the chemical safety expert. They make sure that these powerful substances are handled responsibly and don't end up causing any unintended hazards.
That makes a lot more sense. So for this deep dive, we're looking at the RoleCatcher Career Guide, and they really emphasize the role these neutralizers play in those explosives mixing tanks.
Oh, yeah, that's where the real action is, or should I say the chemistry.
Right. So let's break it down. The guide mentions something about neutralizing residual acids. What does that even mean, and why is it so important in this whole process?
Okay, so picture this. You've mixed up a batch of explosives in these giant tanks, right?
Right.
Well, afterwards, there are these leftover acids just kind of hanging out, and those leftovers, they're what we call volatile substances. Basically, they could react in unpredictable ways if they're not handled carefully.
Oh, so they're like ticking time bombs.
Kind of. Neutralizing those acids is basically like disarming those tiny little chemical bombs. You're making them inert, totally safe.
Wow, that's intense. So we're talking about incredibly precise work with some potentially dangerous stuff. What kind of person thrives in that kind of environment?
You really have to be someone who's detail-oriented, that's for sure. And you need a deep understanding of how different chemicals behave, how they might interact with each other. The guide makes it super clear that even a tiny mistake could have huge consequences. So not only do you have to be comfortable around these substances, you got to be able to work well under pressure.
Yeah, that's not your average desk job, that's for sure.
You got that right. It's not your typical 9 to 5, but that's part of what makes it exciting. The guide actually mentions that a lot of this work happens in places like manufacturing plants, labs, even out in the field sometimes.
Oh, wow. So it's hands-on, real-world stuff.
Definitely. And demanding, for sure, but the guide also highlights how stimulating that can be for the right person.
I could see that. Now, there was this other job title that caught my eye in the guide, nitroglycerin separator operator. What's the difference between that and what we've been talking about?
Ah, that's a great question. And it shows you just how specialized this whole field gets. So the neutralizer, they're dealing with the aftermath, right? Cleaning up the mixing process, so to speak. But a separator operator, they're focused on the early stages. They're the ones extracting and purifying the nitroglycerin itself.
Oh, so they're both dealing with the same volatile substances, just at different points in the process.
Exactly. Different expertise, but both totally crucial.
Wow, so many moving parts. It's like a whole ecosystem of specialized roles in this field.
Mm.
And speaking of career paths, the guide actually lays out a pretty clear progression for nitroglycerin neutralizers.
Yeah, definitely. It usually starts with an entry-level position.
Okay, so like, what are you doing at that stage?
Think of it as an apprenticeship. You're mostly assisting the more seasoned neutralizers, getting the hang of things. Like they'll have you prepping the mixing tanks, making sure everything's set up right, and just watching the processes really closely. It's all about learning the ropes in a safe environment under supervision before you get thrown into the deep end.
Makes sense, yeah. So you're like learning the tricks of the trade from the pros. So then what? What happens after you've got some experience under your belt?
Well, that's when you can start moving up to a junior neutralizer role. The guide explains that at this level, you're handling a lot more on your own. You might even be doing the neutralization process independently, and you'll be expected to troubleshoot any minor issues that come up.
Oh, so that's where the real pressure starts.
Kind of, yeah. It's like you've been following the recipe for a while, and now you're finally allowed to start adjusting the ingredients a little bit,
Yeah.
Make sure you don't ruin the cake.
I feel that. High stakes baking, chemical style.
Yeah.
Okay, but the guide also mentions a senior nitroglycerin neutralizer position. What's that all about? Like, what do you do when you reach that level?
Honestly, getting to senior level in this field, that says a lot about you. It means you've not only got the expertise, but the leadership skills, too. At that point, you're not just responsible for your own tasks, but you're overseeing potentially multiple mixing tanks, maybe even across different projects. And you're the one refining safety procedures, making sure everything's running smoothly. Plus, you get to mentor the newer neutralizers coming up.
Wow, that's a lot of responsibility. So you've basically seen it all at that point,
Mm,
and you're now in charge of keeping the whole process safe and running how it should.
pretty much. It's a high impact role for sure.
No doubt.
Hmm.
So let's say, hypothetically, someone's been doing this for years. They're a total pro at neutralizing nitroglycerin, but they're ready for a change. You know, are there other industries, other positions even, where those skills would be valuable?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where those transferable skills come in really handy. What's cool is the guide actually points out some related career paths you might not even think of. I mean, becoming a chemist is kind of a given, but there's also like chemical processing plant controller. That's more of a management role where you're overseeing the safety and efficiency of huge chemical processes, but the principles are the same.
So, hold on. Are you saying that your experience with neutralizing nitroglycerin could translate to, like, managing the safety of a whole pharmaceutical plant? Or even something like a food processing facility?
Totally. It all comes down to understanding those chemical reactions, those safety protocols, and knowing how to apply them in different settings. It's all connected. There's even, and this one's a bit wild, there's even a soap tower operator listed as a potential path.
Wait, what? A soap tower operator? Okay, now you have to explain that one. That sounds like something out of, like, Willy Wonka or something.
Right. I know. I'm not even sure what that entails exactly. Probably a topic for another deep dive. But just the fact that it's mentioned, it just goes to show you there's so many different directions you can go with this kind of specialized knowledge.
That's kind of mind-blowing. So it
Uh-huh.
sounds like even if you have tons of experience, lifelong learning is still super important in this field.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Things are always changing, new technologies, new safety regulations. You always have to be learning to stay ahead of the curve. And the guide really emphasizes how important it is to network with other people in the industry.
Yeah, makes sense.
So like going to industry conferences, subscribing to, those super specific professional journals, even getting more certifications, it's all about staying sharp and connected.
I can just imagine, like, being a fly on the wall at one of those conferences. Chemists, safety experts, all just, like, swapping stories about neutralizing nitroglycerin.
Oh, I bet those would be some wild tales.
Right. But it makes sense, though. They're all dealing with such high-stakes stuff. It's got to be a tight-knit community.
You're totally right. Those connections are huge in this line of work. And speaking of learning, the guide also got into like the nitty-gritty of actually landing a job as a nitroglycerin neutralizer. They even had sample interview questions. Can you believe that?
Oh, yeah, I saw those.
Yeah.
And they did not hold back. Like, one of them was, get this, can you describe a time you had to troubleshoot a problem during the nitroglycerin neutralization process? I mean, talk about pressure.
Oh, for sure. That's the ultimate test right there. They want to know you can stay calm, think clearly, even when things get a little explosive.
Right. And it's not just about, like, reciting what you learned in a textbook. You have to actually apply all that knowledge about chemical reactions and safety protocols, and in that moment when it really counts.
Exactly. That's what separates the good ones from the,
Right. It takes a special kind of person to handle that pressure. Someone who's not only brilliant when it comes to chemistry, but also cool under fire.
Totally. And, it highlights something really important about this job. It's not just about preventing explosions. It's about being that last line of defense when something unexpected happens. Your expertise. That could be the difference between a small incident and a total disaster.
Well, that's a comforting thought. So this has been quite a deep dive. We've gone from, like, the basics of neutralizing dangerous substances all the way to soap towers. Who knew?
I know. It's amazing, isn't it? This whole world of specialized careers out there, each one with its own challenges, its own rewards, and a lot of times it's the jobs you'd least expect. Those are the ones that turn out to be the most crucial.
Absolutely. And it's a good reminder that behind so many things we just take for granted, the industries, the products, the safety regulations, there are real people working behind the scenes making it all happen, keeping everything running smoothly and safely.
Couldn't have said it better myself. They may not always get the recognition, but they are essential.
For sure. So next time you hear a job title, it sounds like something straight out of, like, a sci-fi movie.
Don't judge a book by its cover.
Exactly. There's probably a really fascinating and important story behind it.
And who knows, it might even inspire your next career move.
There you go. So that's it for today's deep dive. Hope you enjoyed this little journey into the world of nitroglycerin neutralizers.
Until next time.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and as always, never underestimate the power of curiosity.